senior. Oops, it seems like the recording just started. I'll just welcome everybody again. Mention I'm Ekta Patel. I'll be chairing the session called Water for Peace. I am a senior water policy analyst based in Washington, D.C., and I was previously a water and policy advisor at USAID, where our team supported programs in fragile and conflict-affected areas. So today's conversation is going to be quite apt. This session is bringing together four researchers who we see on our screen working on that shared tension of water, which can be a catalyst for conflict, especially as scarcity increases with climate change, and an opportunity, as we'll hear today, for peace through its role in strong treaties and transboundary agreements. Our presenters are going to be looking at the Indus, Israel and Palestine, the rivers along the EU's borders, as well as Central Asia, to examine how these agreements function as tools for cooperation that also require that multiscalar, power sensitive, and conflict sensitive approaches. They're going to be highlighting that rebuilding water infrastructure and water security can be a critical and underappreciated at times pathway to a just and sustainable peace. So I'm just going to introduce the presenters in the order they will be speaking today. First, we have Pintu Kumar Mala, who will present on transboundary river cooperation and peace building, revisiting the Indus Waters Treaty between India and Pakistan. Pintu is a research associate at the Water Resources Research Center at the University of Arizona with expertise in water security and governance, hydropower, and river basin management focused on the hydropolitical nexus in South Asia. Second, we will have Jens Iversen, who will present on from terracentric to hydrocentric peace building in Israel and Palestine. Jens is an assistant professor at the Grotius Center for International Legal Studies at Leiden University, and his research focuses on transitions to peace, environmental law, and international criminal law. Third, we have Aline Tell, who will present on transboundary water governance across or beyond EU borders, legal integration, nature-based solutions, and policy interactions in shared river basins. Aline holds a PhD in law from the University of Geneva, and she also taught at the Institute for Environmental Sciences, previously worked in the energy sector consultancy space on international projects as well. And fourth, we have Eugenie Stocklet, who will present on a multiscalar framework for water resilience and peace building in transboundary basins, insights from Central Asia. Eugenie holds a PhD in environmental sciences and is currently a postdoc researcher based in Paris. Her work sits at the intersection of water geopolitics and climate adaptation and has done extensive field work in the Sir Darya Basin. So our presenters will be going back to back roughly about 15 minutes, and we'll definitely have time for Q&A at the end. So please send your questions via the chat function as they go along. I'll gather them and then we can have a discussion at the end. With that, Pintu, feel free to share your screen if you're using slides, and take it away, please.
Yeah, sure. So I hope my screen is quite visible to you all.
It is, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So good morning, everyone from the Arizona, and I will be focusing on the case of the Indus Water Treaty between the India and Pakistan's. It's a kind of the case of transboundary river cooperations and the peace building regularly. I mean, in case of the emphasis on the hydropolitical nexus in the South Asia. So as you are seeing on the screen, that is on the left side, that is the Indus Basin regions. So largely the 6 rivers covers this much area. And on the right side, you are seeing that the region the Indus Basin covers is mostly the disputed land between the India and Pakistan's. So the area you are seeing in the green regions, that is the disputed regions, and the reasons you are seeing on the like a barbed wire, that territory has been given by the Pakistan to the China thing. So the mine I mean the kind of the conclusion from these two maps, that the Indus basin largely covers the disputed land between the India and Pakistan. So you are seeing on the the red dots are the dams built by the Pakistan on the Indus Basin regions, and the dam which are in the triangle shape, the those are the dams built by the India on the Indus Basin regions. So they are regularly conflicting on these disputed land through the Indus Waters Treaty. So, before jumping into the main content, I'm setting about the background of the Indus Water Treaty between both these two countries. So there were two, I think, 4 and 5 major proposals were, happened between the India and Pakistan just before the signing of the treaty. So these are the initial proposal proposed by the Indian government, then the Pakistani government, then there was a lot of work on the revised version of the proposal on the Indus Water Treaty. So at the very last, the World Bank has a great role in finalizing the treaty. So they decided that the entire flow of the eastern rivers has will go to the Pakistan, and entire flow of the western rivers will go to the India. So Indus Basin regions, as you have seen in the previous map, that the it consists of the 6 rivers. So out of that 6 rivers, the Indus, Chenab, and Jhelum will has been with the Pakistan, and the Ravi, Byas, and the Satluj that has been I mean is lies with the Indian subcontinent. So, and if we largely to talk about the geography of that Indus Basin regions, so Pakistan consists of the 47% of the Indus Basin regions. Then the India goes for the 39, and the China goes for the 8%, and Afghanistan goes for the 6%. So the image on the left side is a kind of the the day before the signing of the treaty, and the image on the right side of the slide, that is the day of the signing of the treaty of Indus Water Treaty, with the stellar role of the World Bank. On the right side of that image, you are seeing the World Bank president, and in the middle of the image is the Pakistan President Ayub Khan, and on the left side is the Jawaharlal Nehru, the former Prime Minister of the India. So at last they went for the finalize the treaty. The eastern rivers goes for the Pakistan, western rivers goes for the Pakistan, and eastern rivers goes for the India. So there was lot of this lot of things had been decided about the dispute resolutions mechanism. There will be the permanent Indus commissions, neutral experts, the court of arbitrations to handle these all the issues related to the Indus Water Treaty. So everything was going well, but accept the lot of kind of the little skirmishes between both the countries throughout the 6 decades of the treaty. But in the 2025 April, the India has come up with the surprise actions, like the abeyance of the Indus Water Treaty. So in response to the terror attack in the Pahalgam regions, that is in the Jammu and Kashmir regions. So after a abeyance of the treaty, the media in the Pakistan, the government in the Pakistan, and the political opposition in the Pakistan has come up with the very counter reactions about that. So there was a lot of reactions from the Pakistan. The political opposition leaders was repeatedly saying about the Indus Water Treaty on the whether the blood will flow or the water will flow. There was a lot of skirmishes was going on. But we can also see the role of the World Bank throughout from the starting of the Indus Water Treaty. And in the previous year, the World Bank also says that World Bank has is the only facilitator to the treaty. It has no right to interfere in these in the in the internal matters of the Indus waters. So there was a lot going on between the India and Pakistan during the mid of the previous year. So largely the world. I'm talking about in the world scenario. Largely, they seen the Indus Water Treaty is the conflict between the both two countries as a kind of the state to state in confrontations. But the thing lies elsewhere. See, the no one is asking about the no one is getting emphasis on the local stakeholders perspectives. No one is saying on the Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir region in the Pakistan, and no one is saying in the the Jammu and Kashmir region of the India. So both the parties and both the countries are neglecting the interest of these two stakeholders. And as you are following the recent news, the POJK has a kind of the great protest is going on right now. And so, I mean, I want to say that these two regions are, has necessary or has a kind of the necessity to include in the, Indus Waters Treaties perspective. But the both the governments are neglecting these perspectives. So we can see enormous examples. If we talk of the Pakistan, there is a kind of the protest is going on in response to the Green Pakistan initiatives. This initiative is kind of the growing the conflict between the Sindh and the Punjab regions. And as far as the India is concerned, the Jammu and Kashmir people are very kind of the very concernable to the Indus Water Treaty, because most of the regions Indus waters covers it is of the Jammu and Kashmir regions. But instead of that, they are facing the water scarcity things, just because of these things. They are kind of the faces about the environment phase failed environment policies, water mismanagements, kind of the water insecurity. So I mean, those two regions are facing a lot in the amid of the politics of the Indus Water Treaty between these two countries. And if we talk generally, we were talking about these stakeholders, and I have worked a lot on these two stakeholders, main regions, that is Jammu and Kashmir and the POJK things. So the image you are seeing on the left side is a Indus Basin irrigation system network in the Pakistan's. So there are a lot of scuffles between the India and Pakistan on these main concerns of the Indus Water Treaty, but both countries are negligible, or kind of they avoid their water situation at the home, at the domestic levels. So no one is saying the industry that the irrigation system in the Pakistan is a kind of the that has that I mean that needs a lot of attentions to that thing. But they are regularly blaming the India on stopping the Indus waters. As far as the India is concerned, the Jammu and Kashmir are regularly, have a voice regarding the share of the treaty about the 80 to 20 percentage. So 80% of the water goes to the Pakistan and 20% of the water goes to the India. So there are a lot of scuffle on the basis of the kind of the sharing of the Indus waters on the 4:1 ratio. And other than this, if we talk about the water security as specifically, so on the part of the Pakistan, there is a lot of militarizations is going on in the specifically near the POJK regions, as you are seeing in the image of in the left side. So these are the river streams of the Indus basins, and lot of the dams are there on the streams. Just near the dam, you can see the most of the cantonment boats and the military assets. Just to to get to get a eye over the dam and the safety of the dam, in case it's a kind of the hypothesis I made in this paper. There can be chances that there are a lot of militarization is happening near the dam infrastructure and or in the POJK regions. So that's how they are securitizing the water issues in the between the India and Pakistan. Other than these bilateral scuffles, there is also need to focus on the larger geopolitical chessboard in the South Asia. So there is also a scuffle going on between the India and China on the Brahmaputra rivers. So India and Pakistan have this scuffle on the in Indus Waters Treaty, and there is also kind of the very water miserable scenario is going on in the Tibetan regions, which is also called as the Asia's tower. The water tower of the Asia. So if anything happens between the India and China, it also impacts the India and Pakistan. And if anything happens on the India and Pakistan, it will also going to be, impact on the India and China's water issues and relations also. And see, as far as these issues concerns, we are seeing that the bilateral concerns between the India, China, and Pakistan regions. But there is a kind of the extra additions to these water complexity or hydropolitics in the regions. That is the India, China and Pakistan's hydropolitical nexus in the Himalayan regions. And it has a kind of the very grievous impact on the national security of India. China is regularly helping the Pakistan in building the dam in the POJK regions, which is a kind of the, very disputed regions between the India and Pakistan's. So it has to be going a kind of the lot of repercussions in the coming year, in the coming decade, on the if we see the hydropolitical scenario of the South Asia. This is the picture of the lead bank of the Damer Basha dams, on which China is helping to the Pakistan in maintaining all these infrastructures and all. This is the Mohammed Dam. China is also helping on the Mohammed Dam. And in addition, there is a lot of climate climate change is going on in the Tibetan regions, extreme heat, water stress, and just because of that water climate change and the water stress, that is, Tibet is facing a lot of displacement and the water scarcity issues and all. So if we see all these scenarios, the real case scenario in the Southeast is going on. India is concerned about the water availability is a kind of the 80 and the 22 ratio. And Pakistan concerns is all about the water issues always carries with the Kashmir regions, and lot of local stakeholders perspective is going on about Jammu and Kashmir and the POJK regions, particularly if we talk about the Punjab and Sindh regions, is a lot of scuffles is going on between the domestic water issues. And lastly, the Afghanistan, if both the nations and both the countries are wanted to renew or modify the treaty, so there might be a question may be raised on the whether the Afghanistan and China should be party, because most of the I think the little part also includes the China as a region in the Indus Basin region. Afghanistan also consists of the Indus Basin regions. So there might be any questions might be raised about the how about the Pakistan, how about the Afghanistan and China as a party to the Indus Water Treaty. But as far as these concerns has been raised, India does not want to be China as a third party, and Pakistan does not want to be Afghanistan as a third party. So After seeing all these things, the bottom line is that the South Asia, particularly the India and Pakistan, needs the social vision for the Indus Water Treaty. And the social vision largely depends upon the environmental peace building framework that has to be carried out. Thank you so much. I hope
Thanks,
you liked
Pintu.
it.
Thank you, Pintu. If anybody has questions, please post them in the Q&A and we'll gather them and collect them. Jens, it's your turn now. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm a longtime admirer of the sort of environmental peace building and all the scientific expertise that goes into it. My main objective is really to get some feedback on the course of my research. So I really appreciate any constructive comments. And if you think of something that doesn't get covered, I'm very findable online. So I really welcome any emails or anything afterwards. So thanks, Ekta, for hosting, and Pintu. I thought that was a really great presentation. The sort of bottom line up front for my upcoming article, I think in terms of peace building priorities in the West Bank, there should be more focus on water security for Palestinians and water equity between Israeli settlers in the West Bank and West Bank Palestinians. And I guess by implication, that means less emphasis on other issues, which is always troublesome. So that's where I've sort of ended up. My presentation today is mostly about how my article gets there. And by means of introduction, I'm going to give a little sort of preface about what I think is the neglected importance of being future oriented when evaluating laws and policy applied to war and occupation. And then I'll try to provide a little roadmap regarding my research on water and Israel and Palestine in general. I've recently published an article in the Israel Law Review on what Israel owes the people who live in the Gaza Strip with respect to water. So here I'm hoping to build on that and focus more on the West Bank. So just to start out with, I'll say something that I'm in the international law faculty. It might be provocative to some of my friends and colleagues who are focused on international law, but I feel is probably obvious to a lot of normal people, right? That wars and occupations should be judged on their long-term results, not solely on the results, not completely teleologically, but the results are really important, and not just prudentially, but legally. So for my colleagues, for international lawyers, we tend to judge state war making by an evaluation of certain legal justifications, usually centered on the past and the short-term present. So it's an armed attack that justifies recourse to the use of force in self-defense. Individual targeting decisions tend to be based on military necessity. So we say jus ad bellum justifications have to do with an exception to a general prohibition based on what the enemy did in the past and in the present, whereas jus in bello justifications tend to have to do with what, the interlocking short-term set of obligations and privileges are for parties to a conflict or occupation. But either way, in international law, in sort of orthodox analysis, it's not that focused on long-term results. And I think that can be the case for international law debate on water in the context of occupation as well. But I think this isn't really how wars are judged by normal people or expertise coming in from outside international law, and sort of the paradigm that I think informs a lot of this is World War I, World War II, whereas World War II is sort of shorthanded as the good war, right? Not just because it was against fascist and militarist regimes, guilty of these unimaginable horrors, but because of the results, because of the resulting peace, right? Not only did the good guys win, but peace was sustained. Whereas if World War II is, a story of success and triumph, World War II is remembered as tragic. Not only is there this unprecedented suffering and death, but the peace fails. And so, if the suffering of World War II is attributable in large part to the failure of states to transition from World War I to a just and sustainable peace, when you think about that, I think World War I, jus post bellum, was characterized in some senses by an ethos of scarcity, of zero sum, whereas I think World War II, jus post bellum, is characterized by this focus on sustainable peace through growing abundance. And this common sense impulse to focus on long-term results, it's not an argument that ends justify the means or to undercut the prohibitions against aggression or war crimes or sort of floor. It's to say we should have higher ambitions and expectations for states engaging in uses of force that can at least internally be justified as defensive, but that the goal of a just and sustainable peace has to remain central to war making and occupation choices. So I'm trying to approach the issue of water in the West Bank with a similar sensibility. So not just what's allowed or demanded by law or justice, but trying to think strategically about what will get us where we want to go. War, occupation, they're tragic not only in present suffering or legal violation, but because the long-term results and present prospects are so dismal, right? So I'm hoping this next article will continue to help people ask questions about whether visible inequities in water security make a just and sustainable peace less likely, or conversely, what opportunities for increased security exist for both sides of a conflict with a revised policy towards water security. On the optimistic long range side, I'm trying to focus on water as this opportunity for peace building, right? I think generally with this conflict, there's a big focus on territorial questions, on demographic questions, what I'm trying to characterize as terracentric focused conflict resolution or peace building. But these tend to be zero-sum games. Either one side or the other side tends to control or dominate any piece of land. Water-based, or what I'll call hydrocentric peace building, not inherently zero-sum, right? Because of possibilities of things like desalination, treatment, efficiency. More metaphorically, I think it's interesting for peace building efforts to focus first and foremost on areas of potential abundance if there's bona fide goodwill and efforts to achieve a just and sustainable peace. And I think one might sort of map the divide between terracentric and hydrocentric peace building onto more generally a divide between scarcity peace building and abundance peace building. On the more short range and admittedly sort of pessimistic side, specifically because of this potential variability, I want to try to discuss intentional infliction of water insecurity as an indicator and a pressure point, right? An indicator whether there is actually sort of a bona fide plan for just and sustainable peace or not. There are a lot of complicated aspects to measuring compliance with the laws of occupation or human rights compliance within the context of occupation. There's obviously been endless analysis in this area. Water is measurable, it's visible if you look, and I think there's a strong argument to say there really isn't a defensible reason for not providing something much closer to equity than currently exists. And I think water equity should be a potential pressure point for policy to move the policymakers in a better direction. And that's one of the main takeaways of the article in its current form. In terms of structure and scope, the scope, my article isn't primarily focused on characterizing individual instances of conduct. I'm not a water scientist. I'm not trying to do, breakthrough scientific analysis. It's not, based on sort of itemizing individual kinetic acts of violence and how that impacts water rights or international human rights or law of armed conflict or international criminal law. The focus is primarily on overall water policy in the West Bank with reference to, but hopefully, not too much reliance on the situation in the Gaza Strip or Israel proper or surrounding states. My structure, I am sort of bringing forward for, not assuming everybody's read my current article, right? Some of the main takeaways from my recent article on Gaza and water. So both sort of a literal summary and some of the more meta reflections about why I made certain choices as an author. I want to contrast the situations between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank in terms of this goal of hydrocentric peace building. I think there's a tendency for people when they approach this area in sort of naive terms to think of a generic dry Levant and a monolithic Israeli-Palestinian or Arab-Israeli conflict. But there are really important differences in terms of hydrology, in terms of Israeli presence, in terms of Palestinian governance, and the water infrastructure and economics that you have to understand if ideally hydrocentric peace building is going to be successfully pursued. And with that sort of framework, I then try to discuss what Israel owes to the people who live in the West Bank in terms of water security and water equity. And then I'm closing with reflections on this phrase that's popular in activism and domestic politics about theories of change. What's your theory of change on this? And then try to connect it to the idea of theories of peace, or what you might call war aims in international relations and international law, which ties into the scholarship of Jus Post Bellum. So also trying to discuss why it's perhaps better to emphasize opportunity rather than obligation when advocating for peace building in certain contexts where there is the opportunity for sort of a more abundance framework. All right. I do want to throw out some of the takeaways from my Gaza analysis. I'm really happy to get feedback from that because that's obviously going to feed into my ongoing scholarship. So I published this article in the Israel Law Review on what Israel owes the people who live in the Gaza Strip with respect to water. I intentionally emphasize obligations that persist regardless of whether one considers the current state of affairs an armed conflict or not, because that tends to come and go, and I'm hoping the work is helpful regardless of the current moment. And one of the central arguments in the article is that when considering the subject, it's not only necessary to center water in the context of war, which I think we'll have universal agreement with on this panel, but that there's really an obligation to have a theory of just and sustainable peace that controls the choices Israel makes during war and occupation, and that even in the hypothetical, if Israel was only acting in the interests of Israel and Israeli citizens with no other humanitarian concerns, allowing unnecessary water insecurity was not only illegal, it was a self-threatening blunder. I'm not going to go into all the sort of meta questions about, why I made certain choices with too much. But I do, I'm going to go ahead because I trust the panel and I want feedback. It was sort of testing out a little bit of a theory of change in terms of an open conversation with Israeli scholars and Israeli readership. I really wanted to present to the conference, get feedback, submit a draft, get feedback from peers they would pick, publish in the Israel Law Review, prompt responses. Obviously not in a position, to talk to leadership in Gaza. I see the hand, Ekta. Yeah. With this, I really love feedback in terms of not only what should go into this, but sort of where I should think about trying to publish it, right? Whether Palestine Yearbook of International Law is a good source, or one of the more specialist peace building, um, uh, uh, you know, you know, thinking about who it would be interesting to talk to, who is my readership, how am I trying to convince them, how should I phrase it? So I really do want to leave proper time. I think that's 15 minutes, so I'm going to sign off, Ekta, but I would really appreciate any thoughts you have. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jens. That was really insightful. Aline, do you want to take it away?
Yes, so let me share my slides. Wait, how do we do that again?
There's a share option.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
I saw it. I have so many things open. Results shared. Yeah, should work. Do you have it as? Oh no, I need to do the full. Yeah, is it working?
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, good. All right. So thank you very much for having me presenting some part of the research I'm working on these days. So very quickly to give you a bit of context. So I work mainly on topics related to the adaptation of global principles to basin and national like implementation. And so how are the different translation or transposition of principles are sometimes creating some gaps in between the different jurisdiction and scales of implementation, and who is leading this transposition and the type of effects it has. So I work on this project. So I'm from the University of Geneva, and for this project specifically, we work with some partners in Hungary and Croatia. So on the main topic is a transboundary water cooperation between EU member states and third countries, so non-EU members, and the governance resilience analysis and hydropolitical model building. And we work on 4 basins: the Danube, the Rhine, the Rhone, and the Po. So it's a bit dense, but bear with me. I'll try to be quick for each basin. The reason why I'm showing you a map of Switzerland is because so as a Swiss partner, it doesn't look like we are part of some of the basin that I've just mentioned. But here you see that for the Rhone, there are 3 tributaries that are contributing to the Rhone basin that comes from Switzerland. For the Rhine, we have the Aar and the Rhine taking its source in the Alps. For the Danube, we also don't see Switzerland as part of the Danube basin, but there is actually an important tributary taking its source in the Grison canton. And for the Po, we have 6 tributaries contributing to this important Italian river. So that's just to give you a map, and the reason why Switzerland is interested in this project is also because, as most of you may know, Switzerland is not an EU, part of the EU countries. So it's a third country. So we all know that climate change is provoking different types of pressures, so the rising temperature, changing precipitation, etc. All of this is having some impacts and contributing to food production issues, not only in one country, but in countries that are part of one basin when there are issues for one of the important tributary or the main watercourse itself. So you can see that on the side I've put from conflict, so that's a little one that you will see in the next slides. And so 2 peace building outcomes. So here I just want to remind the main global principles that comes from the Water Convention, the Watercourse Convention, Water Framework Directives at the EU level, and the Flood directive. So I will only talk about nature-based solutions because my colleagues are talking about other topics, but I wanted to show how some of the projects are using nature-based solutions to actually solve conflicts between countries. So there are some particular articles talking of the prevention of harm, etc., reducing impacts, and using reasonable and equitable solutions in all of these different global and European instruments. But what else? Do we have other tools? Because this is going to be, so for the Water Framework Directive and the Flow Directive, they are implemented by EU countries, but what about the third countries that are part of those important European river basins, such as the Danube? Here, I just want to map the situation for the four basins. So you see on the top left, for the Danube, you have some EU countries, you have non-EU countries, and you have the ICPDR framework for the river basin, and you have also some countries that are non-ICPDR. So basically, you would have some different type of mechanisms and bilateral agreements between five type of countries. You see that Poland and Italy are not, so they are EU countries, but they are not part of ICPDR. So yeah, there are different ways to cooperate, and that's also the case for the Rhine. It's much easier for the Rhône and the Po because you have less countries involved. For the Rhône, only two countries, with France being an EU country and Switzerland the non-EU country, but the non-EU country is at the source of the watercourse, so that can lead to other problems, which we will see later. And for the Po, we have three countries, but France is really a small part of it. So I've selected some 5 cases, 2 for the Danube, because I wanted also to talk about the case of Ukraine, but otherwise I specifically looked at cases where Switzerland will be involved. And so here you have the sub-basins, so tributaries to the main watercourses, and what was the main conservation objectives for the countries. You see who is an EU country and who is a third country as well in this table. So the first case, we have the Tisa River, which is one of the most important tributary of the Danube. So it's the largest sub-basin of the Danube, and the river itself is 962 kilometers long. And it's flowing through Ukraine, Hungary, and Serbia. And so the other countries are just part of the basin. The main issue that there was in this sub-basin of the Danube was the biomass cyanide spill in 2000, where you see here a picture of the damage caused to the fish. There was some recurrent floods and a fragmented monitoring system. And so in the year 2017, there was a project that was signed by the 5 countries, the joint TISA, and it is coordinated under the International Commission for the Protection of the Danube River, the ICPDR. And we also have within this river basin organization a TISA group that is handling in particular this zone. And so the different type of nature-based solution that were used in order to mitigate the type of conflicts that occurred in the past was floodplain restoration, wetland rehabilitation, natural flood retention. And here on the side, you can see that there was a memorandum of understanding that was signed. And we see on the bottom that it specifically says that that the plan is aiming at the objectives set by the EU Water Framework Directive. and the EU flood directive. So even though you have Serbia and Ukraine that are not EU countries, they would still have to adhere to these EU tools. And for example, here on the side, I've put that the water code of Ukraine is also including basin management principles and water protection measures and ecological objectives that are very close to the EU objectives. So here we see that the third countries, so Ukraine here in this case, because I've put the water code of Ukraine, is implementing EU legislation via this memorandum of understanding for the joint TISA and via its participation to the ICPDR. On my second case for the Danube is with Switzerland being involved with the Inn River, and how to say that the Inn is hydrologically very important for the Danube because it adds a large volume of alpine water, and it significantly shapes the upper Danube and how it flows downstream. But there was a lot of problem related to hydropower, flood control, and channelization on this bit that is shared by Switzerland and Austria. And so there was that project, an Interreg project that started in 2019. And that is coordinated by WWF Austria. And the main nature-based solution that were used were river widening, habitat restoration, and floodplain recovery again. And that is being implemented via the Alpine Convention that you see on the side. So other countries obviously are also member, but Switzerland is mainly using this Alpine Convention in order to implement. The other countries are EU countries, so these conventions, the Alpine Convention, is holding some principles, EU principles. And I want to mention that Switzerland is not a party to ICPDR because of its share within the basin is too small. So it has to find other ways to cooperate with the rest of the Danube Basin countries. So here it illustrates an indirect influence of EU legislation via another convention. The Rhine, one of the very important rivers here in Europe as well, the main issues were related to habitat loss, ecological degradation, and sediment issues. And we see that on the side, the countries had this habit of channeling the Rhine and straightening it. And now with the project called RECI, that was one of the largest transboundary restoration projects in Europe, that were made between EU and third countries. We see that there has been widening, as you can see on the picture in the bottom, of the river corridor, habitat creation, and natural retention areas, as you can very easily see on the picture. And this was done not only thanks to the framework by ICPR, but also the Treaty of International Rhine Regulation that was quite old, actually. This project is one of the oldest projects as well between the EU and a third country. So it's very identical to the in case for the Swiss legal tools. And here it just shows a very strong example of ecological governance beyond formal EU borders. I want to go fast. For the Rhône, we have the main issue, and I say we because I'm located in Geneva. As I said, Switzerland is at the source of the Rhône, and France is using the Rhône River for hydropower production and also for a cooling system of 14 nuclear power stations. So that's one of the main issue, but it also caused some ecosystem degradation, fish migration issues, and sediment management issues as well. The issue with the Rhône is that there was no agreements like the one that there is for the Rhine and the Danube. And the countries just came after nearly 8 years of negotiation. They came up with two agreements in September 2025. So one is for the Léman Lake, and the other one is for the Rhône itself. Knowing that the Léman Lake already had its commission, which is called the CIPER, the International Commission for the Protection of the Lake Geneva, but the two instruments are separated. Even though the Rhône is flowing to the Léman and then flowing out of the Léman. The two agreements are separated, and the two water bodies are not being, managed in a coordinated way. So there are bilateral agreements, like I said, one for the Rhône water quality, one for hydropower, and one for flood management. So several tools. And here it just shows that Switzerland is also using layers of multiple cooperation frameworks for specific scopes. And that's also what it is doing for the Po with Italy, where it had similar issues of upstream, downstream, allocation issues, with Italy needing for the water for irrigation purposes, and as usual, Switzerland using the water for hydropower. So Italy and Switzerland have now a Ticino ecological corridor restoration plan that is ongoing, and there is a river basin district authority for the Po, but Switzerland is not part of it. So it's just basically the different provinces within Italy, and Switzerland on its side having a cantonal framework, Ticino, that is linked mostly with the lakes, so Lake Maggiore, and then having some agreements for the lakes management as well. So the Swiss collaboration through water management bilateral organizations. So now if
Hi,
I
Elaine.
wanted,
Hey,
so that's the last slide.
Okay, great.
So I couldn't see your hand. I don't know why. So how do EU water governance principle travels beyond EU borders? We see that being an EU member is not actually a prerequisite for cooperation, and third countries are usually finding other ways via a river basin organization agreement or a bilateral agreement in order to come up with solution and mitigate the different impacts and find solutions to past conflicts. Thank you very much, and sorry for taking a longer time.
Thank you. No, that was great. Thanks for the slides too. Finally, we have you, Jenny, who will be presenting.
And can you hear me like that? Can you hear me? No.
You
Okay.
should have share screen access there. It's at the bottom.
Yes, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I wasn't sure since I'm tac. All right. Can you see my screen?
No, not yet.
Okay. So there, is it better?
It's better. We see your whole screen, and I see myself double now.
All right, that's not okay. Why isn't it? I'm so sorry.
I mean, you can see the two options, the sharing of the entire screen or sharing of the specific document.
Yes.
I think what we're hearing is your second login, Eugenie. So I don't know if that also has your PowerPoint or if that's your phone.
Yeah, so I'm using my phone for the audio because I don't know why my computer is not working. And it's not working to share my slides as well, so that's a bit of a problem. How can I? Oh my God.
When you shared the screen where I could see myself, would you be able to put your slides there instead in front of our faces? Maybe that's...
Yeah, that was what I was trying to do. But it doesn't seem like you can see my
It seems like
slides.
you're sharing just the Zoom screen. Like Pintu was suggesting, there might be another option for sharing either another screen or, and if it takes more than 30 seconds, we can also just like hear you the same way we heard Jens, and that went really well too.
Yes, sorry, I'm trying, but it doesn't allow me to.
I
Doesn't
mean,
give me many
you can
options
share
actually.
your PPT with us, one of us, and we can do that for
Sure.
you.
Yes, maybe I can do that.
Yeah. So
Where should I? My God.
Are your slides in like Google Slides or something else that's shareable online?
It's just a PowerPoint. Yeah. I don't know if I can give the just one quick moment. Okay, maybe I'll just start without it because yeah.
Are you starting just without slides now?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, great.
I'll start without. All right. So my presentation today focuses on water resilience building in transboundary basins with insights from the Central Asia. More specifically, it focuses on one aspect I developed during my PhD thesis, and I'm writing a paper right now that uses the case study I developed during my PhD work. And so maybe a little bit of context. Well, I think most of you already are familiar with this aspect, but transboundary basins are particularly important as they represent around 52% of the global population and 47% of the land area. But they can be shared and contested systems because of how water is distributed across land, across space and time. And water has been seen as an object of conflict, either as a trigger, a casualty, or a weapon. But in relation to other many important factors, such as water governance, human activities. And so researchers have stressed that there are more instances of cooperation over water than conflicts. These transboundary systems are heavily affected also by climate change, which increases water variability. And climate change does not just stress water systems, it also reshapes political relations. And as climate change impacts are also transboundary, in a transboundary river basin, there is a need to think adaptation at the transboundary level. which, yes, at the transboundary level. So the purpose of my paper here was to think about how can water resilience be built in the transboundary basin without exacerbating inequality or conflicts. And so I focuses on the different questions, such as whose resilience we are talking about, at which scale, and under what power relations. And it's really stemming from the Central Asia case study, more specifically the Sir Daria Basin case study, which I did my PhD about, with an extensive field work with many interviews, observation on the field. So, well, I had a very interesting map for you to see the Aral Sea Basin. Yes, so the Sir Daria is a river that flows from Kyrgyzstan and the Chenchan range in Kyrgyzstan to Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan, all the way to the Aral Sea. That I guess most of you must know. And the glaciers are the water tower of the region and are especially needed in summer for as they bring water to the system when it's most needed for irrigation purposes. And there is a divide between upstream countries, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, which are very mountainous countries, and downstream countries, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, which are more arid and really depend on the water brought by this river, the Sir Daria River. Another element of context is that water management in Central Asia is very affected by its Soviet inheritance, its Soviet past. To sum it up, during Soviet times, the water was managed in a centralized way in Moscow, and the goal was to use the water for agriculture. And so upstream and downstream were meant to be complementary. Upstream for regulating the way the river flow through infrastructures such as dams, while downstream countries were to use the river for irrigation. After 1991, the interests of the countries diverged. And so upstream countries' interest was to develop their hydropower potential, develop their infrastructure, and to manage water according to their needs in a hydropower production regime. While downstream countries, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, their goal was to keep mostly things as they were in terms of quotas, in terms of water management. And so many agreements were signed, such as the 1992 Almaty Agreement, the 1998 Agreement, and even regional organizations were created, such as the IFAS and the ICWC, because there was a need to continue to cooperate, but it didn't go without tensions. And there are still currently problems with how water is managed, with water releases, with who bears the costs of water infrastructure, with the water energy nexus and the seasonality of water releases. Sorry. And maybe the last element of context about the Sir Daria Basin is that climate change is heavily affecting Central Asia. Experts have witnessed a decrease in snow cover in ice melting, especially in the glaciers, which are the water tower of the region, which should lead to a decrease of the river in the medium to long term, but preceded by an increase due to the melting of this ice. So up until a tipping point that people estimate around 2050. And in parallel to this decrease in snow cover, there is a potential change in the seasonality of the peak flow shifted to earlier in the year, which would impact the irrigation potential. And so we are in a situation where water management is already a tense subject between the country. in a situation where climate change impacts are perceived also in the countries as linked to a risk for water tension. And the question is, how can we think about adaptation in this context, especially as countries in the region think of adaptation as mostly about building new infrastructures. And so here I use different analytical lens. I look at different scales, the local, national, and basin scale. Sorry. I look at the power asymmetries and hydrohegemony in the basin, and at the question of justice. And these are not separate variables, but they co-produce the outcome. So the first finding, again, I had a very interesting slide, but well, not a problem. The first finding is that resilience, the building of water resilience, is not neutral, and different actors can define resilience differently. What resilience means for upstream countries and downstream countries is not the same. For Kyrgyzstan, it means access to more water. It means building more hydropower and more reservoirs. While for downstream countries, it means also access to water, but it's a bit complicated to do the two at once. And there are also different ways to define resilience at the national level and for local communities. And especially as action at one scale can reduce resilience elsewhere. But yeah, I had an example, but I don't think I have time for that. And the second key finding is that adaptation is political and can be a driver of tensions as well. That's the case when, for instance, between hydropower development versus irrigation stability or water allocation changes. And any changes brought by adaptation can be perceived as unjust and bring resistance and conflict. And that's okay, for instance, in Kyrgyzstan, where one of the goals is to develop their hydropower potential with a big project such as the Kambarata Dam project. And this project was very conflictual in the past, a bit less now, but it brought many tensions. And so I developed a two-step approach that I'm still building. Again, it's unfortunate that you cannot see the slide because I would have loved your insights on this. But the first step is to analyze the context in a multi-scale way, with both at the basin scale, looking at transboundary interactions, but also at the local scale, looking at hydrosocial relations, looking at issues of scale, power, and how they interact with each other. And the second step is how to potentially improve water resilience building in a transboundary setting. So for transboundary interactions, that leads to being aware of power, so in a power-sensitive way. When thinking about adaptation in the national scale, that leads to adopting a conflict sensitivity approach of these strategies. And it leads also to integrating the hydrosocial relations, the local perception of water and of climate change. So in a multiscalar way. Maybe to conclude briefly, so there are a diversity of challenges that arise at multiple scale when developing water resilience in a country that is part of a transboundary basin. There are transboundary interactions, there are adaptation initiatives at different scales. There are also local perceptions and hydrosocial relations. And so resilience building is not only a technical and managerial issue, it needs to consider issues of power, of justice and scale, and to account for the context specificities. And so there is in a way, on the one hand, a need for regional cooperation, and another way to conciliate local context and priorities with these regional transboundary impacts. And maybe the key message was that water resilience is political, scale and power shape outcomes. Justice is central to stability, and resilience is a negotiation of power. Thank you.
Nice job. Great job pivoting from that no slides to the slide situation there. If anybody has questions from the participants, please post them in the chat. I see Jens has already posted some questions to others. I can also get us started with two sort of broad questions that any of the panelists here, I'm just going to share that in the chat and you can sort of take a pick. So across all four conversations just now, we have seen that, like you're all looking at it from very different angles and you're pointing to this gap where water agreements are operating at different levels. Like Pintu was talking about how the local and domestic perspectives are sort of left behind. Jens, what I remembered was, that enforceable, measurable equity piece within occupation. How does that come to be? Aline was showing how cooperation runs through these sort of indirect and in like more cases than not, those bilateral channels. Maybe something's going on with Switzerland, which makes it quite unique that I'd love to dig into more, that binds those basin institutions together. And just now from you, Jenny, we're hearing about this resilience and adaptation that's scale dependent and how that transmutes from top to bottom, bottom to top. And so some of the shared questions might just be, is transboundary water governance, and I'll get to you, Pinto, in a second, is it structurally good at that state-to-state level, but weak at the local scale? Or is there something else that we need to consider, like time frames, etc.? So I've put two questions on the side. Feel free to take any of them or get to Jens' question that was posed earlier. So I'll let this be a free fall. Whoever wants to like raise your hand, you can have a stab at it. Go ahead, Pintu.
Okay. So the questions you posted later about the two questions, I think the question by the Yen is a kind of a very good questions, and it would also address those two later questions also. So the questions about the the Indus Waters Treaty about the is genuine scarcity, whether it is the concerns of the genuine scarcity or it's a kind of the symbolism. So how it's connected to each other's. See, vis-a-vis the Indus Waters Treaty, there are two issues that are deeply intertwined. But the symbolism, if we think the symbolism and the geopolitics do much have the kind of the very heavy lifting things. So contemporary, the underlying scarcity is real. Indus Basin's rivers are critical for in irrigations, drinking supplies, and the hydropower generations. Climate change is also putting a heavy pressures on the Himalayan glaciers flows. And but the treaties technical disputes of the dam, like Kisanganga Dam, there was a kind of the huge dispute on the Kisanganga Dam between the India and Pakistan's. So the disputes of the dam like Kisanganga and the Rattle hydropower projects are a kind of relatively manageable engineering aspects. So what keeps this keeps the inflaming the issue is that its inseparability from the Kashmir issues and the broader security relationship. See, we have the example from the previous year, 2025, in April. So India has suspended the kind of the abandoned the treaty just came after the Pahalgam attack, and it was widely understood as a diplomatic signal rather than the immediate kind of the water control measures. So they have been, they're described even by the supporters as a symbolic in the short term. So although the Indus is a kind of the symbolic in the long term, but the episode of the 2025 was regarded as a symbolic in the short term. So the treaty, after all, survived the three wars and prolonged diplomatic freezes over more than the 6 decades. So its sudden collapse in the 2025 was not driven by the thirst or scarcity. So the Pakistan leaders also getting the reactions to that 2025 episodes. They are framing the water as a kind of the existential threat. The Pakistan leaders. I am talking about the Pakistan military. So there is a popular saying about the Pakistans that a country has not military, but the military has a country. So so that Pakistan loses mostly the military in the military terms. The army chief is threatening to the India by striking the missile on their Indian dams. So in the shadow of the Kashmir issue, they are targeting the hydropower development mostly in the Jammu and Kashmir area. So the inseparability from the Kashmir issue, we can hardly seen the Indus Water Treaty dispute as a kind of the flagged issues. So it's a kind of the mix of both.
Yeah,
But if we see the which one is the heavy thing, it's a symbolism.
great. Thanks, Pinto. Does anybody else want to jump in on that? I saw Jenny's hand, but somebody else might want to feel free to jump in right now too.
Okay, I think I'll go.
Yeah.
If that's all right. I think one of the answers to one of the questions you posted on the chat and the question Jens asked me is related. There is a power differential, a heavy power differential in the Sardara basin, in so that downstream countries are actually way more powerful than upstream countries, but upstream countries are in the control of the Sardaya. The Sardaya is controlled for more than 70% of the river flow by Kyrgyzstan. And so the legal framework is heavily affected by this power differential. The current agreements, they are in the sharing of the Aral Sea basin, so the Sardaya and the Amu Darya basin, are in the advantage of downstream countries. And this reflects the actual power asymmetries that there is. There are regional water cooperation in regional water cooperation, how do we say, organizations. But they are also impacted by these power asymmetries. And actually, for instance, Kyrgyzstan withdraw from being an active member of this regional organization because of that. And so I think that was just from the top of my mind. But I see other hands, so please go ahead.
Yeah, Jens, please, Jens.
I'm really happy for the answers to the questions I had. I think maybe slightly building on Eugenie's upstream downstream power dynamic in and also maybe responding to your questions in the chat, Ekta. In Gaza, there's much more of I guess you can say upstream, downstream. It's sort of where you are in the groundwater flow, where the Gaza Strip is entirely dependent on the sort of upstream of that particular reservoir. Um, it's a little bit more complicated in the West Bank in terms of hydrology, but and to some degree power dynamic. But it's interesting to think of states that have the sort of upper hand in terms of hydrology, but the are weaker in terms of geopolitics. In terms of you were asking about scarcity and climate change. I think there's a real disparity depending on whether you're relying on more Israeli or more Palestinian or more pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian sources. So for Israel, they take their own scarcity very seriously. They have there's this document saying, the proposition of solving the problem of Palestinian water shortage by exacerbating Israel's water scarcity is utterly unacceptable, and they're underlining utterly unacceptable. So you want to take, the considerations of both sides seriously, since they need to come to an agreement. On the other hand, I don't think that, what's really driving this is that much climate sensitivity or water sensitivity or scarcity in Israel anymore. We're at what there's an author called Feidelson says the fourth stage of Israeli water, where now that they can throw money at desalinization, water is much less of a problem. So we're really dealing with sort of financial power choices more than sort of irrevocable hydrology or threats of climate change beyond people's control right now, as far as I can tell, trying to come to it objectively.
Thanks, Jens. Aline, please go ahead.
Yes, so I'm just going to use the Rhone River's case, where we have Switzerland upstream and France downstream. The countries have been disagreeing on the quantity of water that is flowing to France for decades, and every summer it's very customary in Geneva. There is a dam and there is a hydropower. I mean, there is a hydropower station and a dam, and we know that Switzerland is controlling the amount of water that is flowing to France through this infrastructure. And every summer, France has to call Switzerland to require for more water to flow downstreams in order to make sure that there is sufficient water for the cooling system of the nuclear stations. Knowing that Switzerland is against nuclear power and France is very, very much pushing for the development of more reactors, there will be, I think it started, but there will be 2 reactors that will be constructed at the site that is closest to Switzerland, only 60 kilometers to Switzerland. And this has brought a lot of tension in the cooperation between the 2 countries, and probably slowed down when there was the announcement of future reactors to be built, probably slowed down the actual signature of the agreement in September 25, because it has been nearly 3 years that it was almost signed. And what we see in this agreement is that there is actually nothing said about nuclear needs. There is a lot of different principles and articles related to the water quantity, but more for flawed reasons, and nothing said for the needs in cooling systems for the French side. So I would say that probably having agreements, having frameworks is important, but in that Swiss-French case, what we understand with my colleague with who I'm working on that is that the agreements are done for the nuclear needs are done outside of this framework. So it's more going to be a private to public agreement between the French operator of nuclear power and the Swiss. So everything is some aspects are actually handled outside of existing frameworks, and we don't really know why. But for the Swiss, it happens often.
Thanks, Celine. We got a question just a few minutes ago in the Q&A for Eugenie. It says, I believe mining is a major industry in Kyrgyzstan and consumes a lot of water and poses major risks of contamination. Did the scope of your research include considering the role of the private sector and the role that industry may play in either contributing to tensions or solutions?
Hi, thank you for the question. Actually, my research was a bit more focused on hydropower and irrigation. So I did not investigate the role of private sector per se. However, well, the consumption of water, I don't think that's yes, it is important in Kyrgyzstan for industry, but I don't think that's the most present issue in the country. And the contamination it poses, of course, are very important. But I wonder whether they are like, I don't know, they are diluted by the fact that irrigation and the pesticides and all the entrants used for agriculture are also having a huge impact on the water quality downstream. And water quality is a huge subject in downstream countries, in Uzbekistan, in Kazakhstan. But I wonder, that's a good question. I should look it up, but I wonder how much, how much there is in terms of the impact of industries on the water quality. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I think we're at time. This has been a great conversation. If anybody has like a last minute takeaway, I took a bunch of questions down and some suggestions for each of you, and I can send it to you in our email thread. Anybody have a final thought? No? Okay, I think we can wrap it up. Yeah, please go ahead.
Just so yeah, thank you for all the other panelists, because it was very interesting. I was very happy to learn about your work. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you to for all four of you, and for NPAX for having this virtual day today.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.